Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back. Episode 18 of the Next Season podcast. I was having a conversation recently with another parent of youth athletes, and we were talking about their kids' development that just all the aspects of growing up and classroom development and athletics and personal, just seeing them grow up. And they asked me, are the brains of athletes different from the brains of non-athletes? Of course, I'm not a doctor, so I shared my personal experience and anecdotes from being a parent. But it got me thinking. And so I looked it up. And today I want to answer this question based upon what I've found as I researched it. And the short answer is yes, in a lot more ways than you may think. So in this episode, I'm going to give you my top 5 most powerful characteristics of an athlete's brain that can enhance performance in all aspects of life. And there are more than 5. There's actually a whole bunch that I found, but I'm going to give you my top 5 superpowers. And watch till the end, because at the end, I'm going to give you a bonus. I'm going to make it 6. And I'm actually going to do a part 2 of this. So the next episode is going to be part 2. Today's going to focus on the superpowers or the strengths. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about the potential downsides or challenges, the things that athletes may face, but others may not, at least not in the same way. So this episode is focused on the positives, the mental superpowers that athletes can develop. And the next episode is going to focus on the mental challenges that athletes are often forced to deal with. So you'll definitely want to tune into that when I release it. So again, we're going to talk about how athletes' brains differ from non-athletes, at least relative to population. This is not to say that every athlete has these attributes or that all non-athletes don't have these. Everyone is unique. Your brain is wired differently though, because you're an athlete. The degree and the specifics do vary across sports because of the training and the motor movements associated with the sport that you train, or the sport that you participate, which is actually one of the benefits and reasons that being a multi-sport athlete is so valuable. But just a couple quick findings. If you take the specific sport out of it, athletes as a general population comparatively have higher gray matter density, greater white matter volume, enhanced neuroplasticity, and optimized brain chemistry. So the neurochemicals such as dopamine and serotonin and endorphins and a whole bunch more. When you take all of those characteristics, they positively improve motor coordination, motor control, memory, reaction time, skill development, emotional regulation, and so many more things. So with all this setting the stage for what's happening, again, how athletes' brains are developed uniquely, I want to emphasize my focus and my goal for this episode, and that's on the mental side of the game. There are a number of neural related qualities that are more related to physical attributes. Like I just said, the motor coordination, the visual processing, spatial awareness, reaction time, pattern recognition, energy efficiency. These are all things that are related to, they're seen physically, they're observed physically. I want to focus on the mental side, understand there is certainly some overlap in what we're going to talk about. And the reason I want to do this topic is because when you're an athlete and you can understand how your brain is working, you're able to use that to stay disciplined in the process and the pursuit of your goals. And you can apply these superpowers in other aspects of life. I learned this too late, and I let my opportunity slip away because I didn't apply this understanding. And I'm encouraging you not to make the same mistake. For each of the traits that we're going to cover, each of these 5 superpowers, I'm going to explain what it is, how it's unique to athletes, what's going on in the brain, just a very high level, and then a few things you can actually do to practice or train this superpower. Okay, so let's jump into 5 strengths of athletes' brains. And again, don't forget the bonus at the end. You want to stick around for that. The first superpower of athletes' brains is heightened focus and concentration. So follow me for a second. Humor me here. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to picture yourself in the batter's box. 9th inning, tie game, full count. The pitcher starts his windup, and in that split second, everything slows down. Everything besides the ball and the release point just fades into the background. The crowd noise disappears. The dugout noise disappears. It's just you and the ball in that moment. Or for you pitchers, if you've ever watched the movie For Love of the Game, Kevin Costner's character is a pitcher for the Tigers, and he's, towards the end of his career, but it follows what he's doing when he is on the mound and he says, clear the mechanism. And that's his cue to push everything out of the way and just pitch to just be present in that moment, and everything else is pushed aside. Some people call this being in the zone. To me, it's more than that. Focus and concentration isn't just about paying attention. It's about controlling the controllables, controlling where your attention goes and keeping it there, especially in those moments of high pressure. For athletes, this is everything. If you can't lock in during a big moment, you're done, right? If your mind drifts in the middle of a play, you're probably going to make an error. If you're distracted in the box, you're going to be late on the fastball. Focus is the skill that separates elite athletes from the guys who can't hang. And it's not developed when you find yourself in those moments. The ability to focus in those critical moments is developed in practice, in the weight room, in the classroom, in your living room, in your bedroom, when you meditate, when you visualize, when you practice these mental skills. It's certainly not developed when you're on your screens or constantly falling into whatever the next distraction is. And here's where athletes have an unfair advantage. Again, most people live in that constant distraction. They're checking their phones every minute. They're constantly looking. If they're bored, they're pulling out their phone. They're changing channels. Constantly, new stimulations are coming in. Your brain craves that. You're always bouncing from one thing to the next. Athletes have moments built into their training, built into their day, and built to their performance where you have to be present in the moment, whether you realize it or not. There was a 2019 study published in the journal Sports Health, and it's listed on the NIH and PubMed websites, and it's titled Play Sports for a Quieter Brain. And it found that the brains of young athletes are able to quiet down the outside noise and attend to important sounds better than non-athletes. The findings suggested that playing sports can change our brains and how well we can sense and respond to the world around us, including sounds, which help us increase focus, attention, and presence. So every rep, every drill, every game forces us to block out those distractions and lock in on what matters. So what's happening in the brain? Why do athletes have the ability to focus? It all comes down to how our brain processes attention. And so the couple things that play here in the brain is increased dopamine and norepinephrine. Okay, and this combination makes your brain more efficient at filtering distractions. The prefrontal cortex, which is essentially your brain's CEO, it's responsible for decision-making and attention control. And so athletes who have a more developed prefrontal cortex are able to constantly engage in high-stakes decision-making under pressure. And another factor here is less overactivity in what's called the default mode network. So most people's brains drift when they're not engaged in something. Athletes train themselves to stay present. So when you're an athlete, you're training yourself to stay present, which is reducing that overactivity in that default mode network, and you're able to stay focused. So again, you already have a focus advantage from being an athlete. Your brain's already being trained this way. How do you take it to the next level? One great thing you can do is to train with a focus matrix or a concentration grid. If you've never tried this, it's a piece of paper or a document or a PDF that has a bunch of numbers on it in random order. And your job is to find them in order. So you identify one, then you identify two, then you find three, then four, and you work your way up. And if you get distracted, if any other thought comes into your mind, you have to start back over. I have free versions of these up on nextseasonathletes.com. So check those out. I've got it from 25 all the way to 100. And there's a whole bunch of different variations you can do as well. So try this before games. This can help you lock your brain in much better than scrolling TikTok in the dugout. Okay. Another thing you can do related to this is something called focus triggers. And you use these before big moments. Athletes do this. If you ever seen No More Garcia Parra, for example, he's adjusting his batting gloves and it kind of looks weird, but that's his cue. He just goes through that system and it's a focus trigger for him to lock back into the next pitch. And this works at all ages. You don't have to have physical things. You can also have phrases that you repeat to yourself. I've done this with my 12-year-old son, and we came up with 3 words that he says before each at bat, sometimes before each pitch, and 3 words he says when he's in the field to pull himself back into the present moment. So it's just a couple key words that he can say to himself. These little rituals can train your brain and shift you back into peak focus. Another one is breathing. So very much related to focus triggers is a breathing practice. So whether it's box breathing or any other way that you breathe, but being able to take a breath, exhale, and recenter yourself in the present moment. There's a couple of things you can do. The last one is kind of more strategic. This is kind of a bigger one. It's not necessarily in the moment, but it's more ongoing. And it's creating friction around phones and screens or really any distraction. I heard this analogy recently I'm going to borrow it and change it for baseball. But never before in the history of human beings have we had access to such exciting and addictive stuff. Information, entertainment, immediate gratification, bad vices, escapes from reality, everything between. And it's right in our pocket. It's right in our hands. Everywhere we go, our face is in it. We put it on the table or desk in front of us. Okay. It's constantly there. Now, imagine you have all of that, not in your phone, but you're carrying around all of that, all those games, all those movies, all those videos, all the pictures you've taken, the apps that you use, all the swipes, all the emails, all the shopping, all the news. Again, all those vices which poison your brain, all of it. You're carrying it around in a big old baseball bag slung over your shoulder. You're with your friends or your teammates, or you're at dinner with your wife or your girlfriend, and you look around and you see that big bag, right? Of course, you're going to be tempted to look at it. It's right there. Even just the act of having that phone near you is distracting your brain from what you should be focused on. I cannot understate the importance of this. So create friction between that distraction and what you should be focused on. And that practice of just putting it aside is helping to strengthen your brain to be able to focus. Your athlete brain already has an advantage, but if you don't train it, you're leaving performance on the table right there with your phone. So again, the first superpower is heightened focus and concentration. The second superpower of athletes' brains is elevated grit and resilience, including stress resilience. Every athlete has these moments, right? There's these moments where your body's screaming at you to stop, your mind is telling you to give up, you just failed in front of everyone, so you feel embarrassed, you just don't feel like you have anything else to give. And what separates great athletes from the ones who quit? It's grit and resilience. It's the ability to get drilled by adversity and to keep moving forward. It's the difference between the guys who make it to the next level and the guys who crumble when things get hard. Again, I learned this the hard way. I faced adversity when I got to college. I thought I was ready. I'd worked kind of hard, not hard enough, but I didn't fully realize the amount of work in the training and the understanding of mechanics that was the standard to be able to perform at the next level. And this is before we had all the information at our fingertips. So when I wasn't getting the playing time and my mechanics went sideways and my mental game went to crap, it was time to put up or shut up. And even though I had made it through freshman year, about halfway through sophomore year, my game was improving, but my grades were suffering, and I quit. Even though I was in line to be the starting outfielder, which is what I wanted, and I quit. That's anti-grit. That's anti-resilience. That's anti-perseverance and tenacity. And that's what I was. And years of pain and regret followed that decision to give up. So don't be like me. What is grit? I'm going to encourage you to go back and check on episode 10 of the Next Season podcast. I'm going to link to it in the notes because I go into this in a lot more detail when I talk about the rubber band traits for athletes as part of the mindset pillar for next season athletes. In short, grit is passion and perseverance towards long-term goals. So it sounds simple, but it isn't just about working hard. It's about working hard when things are not going your way. It's about sticking to your training even when you're going through a brutal slump. It's about keeping your confidence and your effort up after getting benched or getting cut. It's about showing up and grinding when you don't feel like it. And resilience is your ability to take a hit and bounce back stronger. If you don't have grit and resilience, you're going to break down the first time life punches you in the face. And trust me, it's going to punch you in the face. Most people avoid failure and hardship at all costs. If they mess up, they quit. If something's hard, they stop. They're seeking comfort. But as an athlete, you're forced to fail constantly. You strike out again and again and again. You miss a ground ball or you give up the game-winning hit. You get cut from the team and you have to fight for another chance the next year. Baseball is a sport of failure and it is a trainer for life. Name me one sport that has more failure and adversity built into it, because I can't think of one. And if you don't build mental resilience, you're not going to survive. So what's happening in the brain related to grit and resilience? Again, that prefrontal cortex. This is your brain CEO. This is controlling self-discipline, controlling decision-making, and perseverance. As an athlete, you're strengthening this through repeated exposure to failure in high-pressure situations. Another thing at play here is dopamine. So every time you push through a tough workout a tough training session, you come back from failure, your brain releases dopamine. It's a pursuit and reward chemical. So it wires you to crave persistence and to keep going when things are tough. There's also something called the anterior midcingulate cortex, which has earned the nickname the brain region of grit or the tenacious brain. And this area grows when you do hard and uncomfortable things that you don't really enjoy or you don't really want to do, but you know is necessary for the growth that you want to have. So you do them and you persevere. Okay, so that's dopamine in the anterior midcingulate cortex. Also at play here is the amygdala, specifically around stress adaptation. So all of this, all of the pain, all of the training, all the studying, all the work, all of the hard things that you're doing, they're all stressors. And stress, as you know, is necessary for growth. And the amygdala controls that fear and those stress responses. As an athlete, you're training your amygdala constantly to handle stress through repeated high pressure moments. And this can make you better at staying calm in the face of adversity than an average person. And I want to add here, because it was going to be part of this list before I whittled it down, and it's the ability of athletes to have better emotional control or emotional regulation. Do we always see that? No. We know that athletes have ridiculous outbursts and fits of frustration, and so do parents and fans and coaches. We're human. But it's this stress training that can help with the emotional regulation. As you intentionally and purposefully train your mental game, your ability to handle the emotions are going to improve. So how do you take this to another level? Here's a couple things you can do. Embrace hard reps. You don't build grit by doing what's easy. You build grit and resilience by leaning into the hard stuff. Make it a habit to intentionally put yourself in those difficult situations every day. Get comfortable with discomfort. And then you want to work on reaching the point where you're uncomfortable with comfort. And that's the area where you're going to find real grit and real resilience. The second thing you can do is reframe failure as necessary. The best athletes don't see failure as bad. They see it as an essential part of the process. In fact, it's good. Failure only breaks you if you let it. And the third thing you can do, and this may sound corny to some people, but a great way to describe it is battle statements. It's things you repeat to yourself when you want to quit, when you feel like giving up, when your brain is saying, this is too hard, right? Just stop. And it wants an easy way out. You can fight back by saying, I do hard things. One more rep. I don't stop when I'm tired, I stop when I'm done. Whatever that phrase is for you, repeat that to yourself. And those words can then fuel your body, and your body's ability to persevere builds the strength and the grit and the resilience. So when you control the conversation in your head, you're actually controlling the output and influencing the outcome. Athletes who build the rubber band traits go further in sports and in life. So that's grit and resilience. The third superpower of athletes' brains is that they have greater neuroplasticity. And I'm sure you've heard coaches tell you to make the adjustment. We can debate over whether that's good advice or good coaching or not. But what he's trying to say is to take the information that you have from situation A and figure out what you need to do differently and then execute it in situation B. Make the adjustment. So example, your first at bat, you're late on the fastball, but then in your next AB, you're turning on a 95-mile-an-hour fastball like it's BP. Or you're a pitcher who's struggling with command early, and then suddenly you're able to lock in and start painting corners. What's happening here? That's neuroplasticity. That's making the adjustment. That's the ability to learn and rewire itself and adapt and either learn new skills or harness those skills. And here's the thing. Athletes have a more plastic brain than non-athletes. Everyone has incredibly moldable and adaptable or plastic brains until about age 25 or 26. And then it starts to taper off, right? It becomes more rigid. There are certainly ways to activate neuroplasticity for learning and growing and adaptation, even as an adult. What's cool is many of the ways to do this are built into what you're doing as an athlete every day. Learning and practicing new skills, physical training and exercise, studying, those hard reps, non-dominant hand exercises, visualization and meditation, getting quality sleep. These are all things that can increase neuroplasticity and help you learn. And sleep obviously is an essential part of learning. It's kind of where that sets in. But all of those things are critical activities that athletes are doing every day. And they're what helps you build neuroplasticity. One of the biggest and most critical for activating neuroplasticity is failure. Failure is a precursor for learning because your mind and body want to avoid it. So what you're doing is forcing learning and growth. And that's why failing in practice, making mistakes in practice, shouldn't be condemned or shouldn't get you upset. It's good. It's necessary. Neuroplasticity is how you learn new skills. It's how you break bad habits and how you improve over time. Every time that you practice something, whether that's hitting, pitching, a mental skill like focus and concentration, your brain is literally rewiring itself and strengthening neural pathways, making it easier for you to perform that task next time. Your brain is doing this all the time. If you're actively training the right things, you're going to keep getting better, adapting faster, and outpacing your competition. If you're practicing bad habits and repeating those bad habits, your brain is going to lock in on those too, and you're going to stay stuck. So again, every human has neuroplasticity. And because as an athlete, you're doing these behaviors and actions all the time, you're forcing constant adaptation, and it's extending that youthful neuroplasticity even longer. So when we talk about what's happening in the brain, I'm going to encourage you to check out episode 14 on turning goals into habits. Really what it's about is the creation of new positive pathways of these movements or skills that you're trying to learn in something called long-term potentiation, or the breaking of bad habits or forgetting or replacing those habits that you don't want to have. And that's long-term depression. So again, check out episode 14 for more about that. But what's happening in the brain is those neural pathways. The stronger that connection gets, it's going to start to become more automatic. That's long-term potentiation. Another thing at play here is something called myelin, which is, it's like the insulation on electrical wires, right? Your neural pathways have this coating, myelin, and it makes it faster and more efficient for your brain to process information. So the more reps you take with focus intent, the more that myelin builds up and the better you're going to get at that skill. And then last thing is this long-term depression. So your brain is able to delete what you don't want to use. Just like your muscles can atrophy if you stop using them or exercising, your body can get rid of unused connections. And that means if you stop practicing a skill or stop having a behavior, your brain is pruning those pathways away, and that's called long-term depression. And this is why repetition is so important. You have to keep reinforcing the right patterns, and also have to keep setting aside the bad habits that you're trying to break, because your brain has wired them in. If you want to get better, if you want to improve your neuroplasticity, a couple things you can do. Train in high variability environments. Mix up your routines. If you constantly take BP off the same coach at the same speed, you're not getting that new stimulation and novelty, which is essential for learning. So different pitching speeds, mixing in T work with live BP, different arm angles, different hitting drills, or even if it's something that you would not normally use, you're teaching those new skills and new movements, and it's to help you refine your game time swing. Another thing you can do is slow down to speed up. And I know this sounds counterintuitive, but it's backed by science. When you're learning a new skill, slow it down, break it down in the most simple basic steps, and then build upon it. If you're working on a swing adjustment, take slow motion reps to really feel the movement, right? If it's mental training, if it's mental skills or visualization, instead of jumping right into a 30-minute or a 20-minute meditation session, start with like 2 minutes, slow down, and then speed it up once you've started to build those habits. And then the last thing is really embrace that struggle phase. When you're learning something new, it's going to feel uncomfortable. And that's because your brain is learning that new wiring and the new pathways, and it's messy. Most players bail too soon. You give up in that hard phase. And I'm going to encourage you to stick with it, even in that struggle phase, in that middle phase. That's how you're going to separate yourself. The fourth superpower of athletes' brains is improved decision-making under pressure. There's an awesome video on YouTube from Insider Science, and it came out a couple years ago. You may have seen it. And it talks about how it should be virtually impossible to hit a major league fastball. In it, it talks about how a 95-mile-an-hour fastball reaches home plate in about 400 milliseconds, which is less than half of a second. And in that time, your brain has to calculate the pitch speed, the spin, the trajectory, and a whole bunch of other stuff, all essentially without any conscious thought. You got to check this out. After this episode and the other episodes I do mention, I want you to go check this out. I'm going to link to it in the details. But the point is that baseball players practice so much and fail so much at hitting a pitch that it's no longer about seeing and processing all that information and reacting to it, because your brain can't work that fast. What they found is it's the ability to anticipate where the pitch will be. So there's still a see and decide. There's still a go, no go. But once the decision is made to swing, it's really about anticipating where the ball will be in relation to your swing path based upon learned experience from thousands of reps. So again, it's not about seeing and reacting to where the ball is. It's seeing and anticipating where you think the ball is. And that's the only way it's possible for you to hit a baseball. Athletes, especially elite ones, have trained their brains to make decisions faster and more accurately, especially under high stakes. Decision-making under pressure is exactly what it sounds like. It's your ability to stay cool and assess the situation quickly to make the right move when it matters and when everyone is watching, when your team is counting on you. Not all situations are going to be about pure anticipation, but the constant quick nature of decision-making that you have to do as an athlete, swing or don't swing, cut the throw off or let it through, which base to throw to, which pitch to call in a situation. All of those decisions can train your mind to become more decisive and more convicted in your decisions, especially in those pressure situations. And if your brain isn't wired for it, you freeze, you hesitate, you make the wrong call, or you don't have confidence in your decision. When you train your decision-making ability, you instinctively make the right move at the right time without hesitation, or you have the ability to stand by it. This is one of the key strengths of those who are known as clutch players. The pressure doesn't faze them, or it can elevate their focus and decision-making in the moment. So what's going on in the brain when you're under pressure? Your brain's threat response kicks in. So when you feel that pressure, you start to release adrenaline and cortisol. And this can either sharpen your focus or overload you with stress. It depends on how you handle it and how you view it and how you've trained it. The prefrontal cortex, again, that brain CEO controlling rational thinking and decision-making, is trained to work more efficiently under stress as an athlete. And a third factor at play is something called the basal ganglia. And this takes over and instinct kicks in. When you're well-trained, decisions shift from conscious thinking, which is slow, to automatic responses, which is fast. And this is why great players don't freeze in those big moments. They've trained their instincts and built the anticipation. And a lot of that comes from the basal ganglia. So what can you do? As an athlete, here's how you can train this. Again, slow the game down. Use something called mental blueprints. Oftentimes, as you go into the next level of competition, you go from high school into college or college into pros and single A into double A, triple A into the big leagues, the game speeds up. The games get faster. But when you're playing really well, when you're really locked in, you hear players talk about how the game slows down. And that's because as an athlete, you're training your brain to process information faster through repetition and visualization. You're creating mental blueprints. If you picture what you're going to do in a situation, when that situation or that stimulus presents itself, you simply execute what you've already visualized. And this is why you're coached since you were 6 years old to know what you're doing when the ball's hit to you. How many of you have heard that? When you think about what can happen, if the ball's hits in my right, where am I going to go? If the ball's hits in my left, where do I go? If there's a runner on second, nobody out, and I'm up to bat, I'm trying to find a pitch that I can drive to the right side. And then it's just simply executing. You're preparing your decision-making and building the anticipation. You've thought about it, you visualized it, now you just execute. And you can apply the same concept to life. Okay, situational awareness, room scanning. If you know where the exits are, if you have awareness of who and what is around you, then if something were to happen, you're less likely to be caught off guard and make poor decisions and more likely to be able just to execute what you thought about. So again, slow the game down, build those mental blueprints. Along with that is train under those stressful conditions. If you never simulate high pressure situations in practice, your brain is not going to know how to handle that in a game. It's not just about visualizing or thinking about it, but you got to put your mind and body through those physical reps in mental reps in high stress situations. And then the last thing on this one is get comfortable with failure. Again, this is a repeated theme, but the best decision makers trust their training and go all in on their choices. And if you fail, you are able to live with it. Okay. Get comfortable with failure. When you train your body this way, when you train your mind this way, you're going to be able to slow the game down. The noise is going to fade out and you're just going to play. The fifth superpower of athletes' brains is higher level goal-oriented thinking. If you've ever noticed how some people just drift through life, right? There's no real direction. There's no real sense of urgency. There's no drive. In episode 7, I laid out the 5 bricks of the effort pillar for next season athletes. And in that, I shared a story about one of my college teammates who was a freaking stud. He had all the tools. He had the size, he had the strength, he had massive power. He had it, right? Everything but effort and ambition. And you can guess how his baseball journey ended. He didn't go anywhere. And just because you're an athlete doesn't mean you're automatically goal-oriented. But as a population, athletes do have a greater goal drive for a number of reasons, including our linking or association between that target or ambition, right? The things that we want, and the actions or the efforts required to get there. So it becomes a process wired into our brains. We set targets, we identify the actions required, and we execute. Episodes 13 and 14 cover goals and habits in more detail. So I know I'm giving you a bunch of other episodes to check out, but if you want to learn more about this whole goal orientation, including steps to take, you're going to want to check those out. But real quick, goal-oriented thinking is the ability to define a clear outcome, to map out a plan to get there, and to adapt and stay disciplined in the process. Okay. Athletes live in this mindset because our sports demand it. You can't just hope or show up or want. You need a plan. You need to grind. You need to train. You need to execute with intention. You need presence. You need humility and effort. All of these things of elite athletes. And this is the kind of thinking that separates average players from great players. Now, here's where athletes as a population are unique from non-athletes. The average person sets vague, weak goals. I want to get in shape. I need to get better at time management. As athletes, we have to set very specific, aggressive, measurable goals. I'm adding 4 miles an hour to my fastball this offseason. I'm committing to 200 extra swings a day. I'm taking 1,000 ground balls a week, rain or shine, right? They're specific, aggressive, measurable goals. And here's why. We're used to structured progress. We're constantly chasing milestones of things we want to accomplish. And we've been trained to handle long-term goals. We got a long season. There's a long-term goal at the end. We understand delayed gratification. We know that the work that we put in today is not going to pay off immediately, but we trust in the process and we trust in our process. Let's talk about what's happening in the brain as it relates to goal setting. The prefrontal cortex, that master planner responsible for all the functions, the CEO functions of the brain, it's more developed in athletes because of years of discipline training. The dopamine system, that motivation and reward chemical, athletes can often have a more active dopamine system because again, we're constantly setting and achieving goals. And here's the basal ganglia again, that habit center responsible for forming automatic routines. It's helping you build habit loops, your routines, your training, your diet, your recovery, your morning routine, so you can stay locked in and work towards those long-term goals without overthinking every step. So how do you optimize this? How do you sharpen this skill even more and become more goal-oriented? Go check out episodes 8, 13, and 14. I break down the ambition pillar, I break down goal setting, and I break down habits. I don't want to repeat it all right now because it's all covered there. And in that, you're going to learn a next level framework for goal setting. We talk about the creative player mentality. We talk about relentless ambition without attachment and much more. Okay. So definitely go check out episodes 8, 13, and 14. So those are your 5, but here's your bonus. I told you I was going to give you a bonus superpower, and here it is. Athletes in general have a better ability to manage pain and discomfort. Baseball is a game of toughness, and not just physical toughness. Many sports are. Football, wrestling, hockey, there's a whole bunch of sports that require physical toughness. But baseball is more than just taking a fastball off the ribs and jogging to first like it didn't happen. It's mental toughness. It's emotional toughness. It's about understanding the amount of failure that you're going to take day in and day out. And that's what separates guys who thrive from the guys who break. Athletes don't just experience more pain than the average person. We process it differently. Athletes don't let pain control them. They control how they react to it. Now, at the beginning of the episode, I told you I was going to give you 5 superpowers, but try to focus on the mental side. So why am I talking about physical toughness and managing pain? Because so much of it is actually mental. And this is the last time I'm going to say this, but I'm going to encourage you to go check out episode 7 on the effort pillar, because in that episode, brick number 5 is all about physical and mental toughness. It's what I call leather skin and iron will. And we talk about managing pain and injury, the mental side of physical pain, and how to build pain tolerance and how to handle pain in the heat of competition and much more. It's very, very actionable. So go check that out. So let's talk about what's happening in the brain. Why can some guys handle pain better than others? Why do some guys, they're called tougher or thicker skin? A lot of it has to do with the endorphin system. So they're kind of your built-in painkillers. Along with that is adrenaline or norepinephrine. That's your ability when you've got elevated stress to be able to just keep going and kind of have these superpower strengths or toughness in a moment of high stakes or high stress. Your brain releases these endorphins and helps you to push through the pain. Along with the endorphin system is the prefrontal cortex. Again, this is going to be consistent across all of these superpowers. A lot of it starts in the prefrontal cortex because this is the part of your brain that controls mental toughness and emotional regulation, along with a whole host of other things. The third thing that's happening in the brain is something called the insular cortex, and that's your brain's interpretation system. This part of the brain decides how much pain you actually feel, and athletes generally interpret pain differently than an average person. We see it as a challenge, not necessarily as a threat. It's part of the game that we play. We understand going into the game that there's a chance, and there's probably even likelihood that we're going to get hurt. And we accept that as part of the risk for playing the game that we love. So how do we optimize this? Reframe how you see pain, okay? Push through discomfort regularly. The more that you expose yourself to discomfort in uncomfortable situations, the better your brain handles it and the more tough you're going to become. Learn to separate pain from injury, okay? There is a distinction. A lot of this comes with maturity, but there's a distinction between pain and injury. Pain that is not causing damage does not necessarily need to be avoided. But understand the difference between what is pain, what is soreness, and what is injury. There's also an awesome tool that I came up with and describe in that episode 7 called the Sea Walk. And I have a free resource on nextseasonathletes.com about the Sea Walk. So if you're curious about what to do when you get hurt in the moment on the field and how you can move towards a target and stay tough, check out the Sea Walk in episode 7. So there you go. There are the 5 superpowers of athletes' brains, plus your bonus superpower. Remember, your brain as an athlete is wired differently. And if you learn to use these brain superpowers, you're taking the governors off of your mental engine. The question I have for you is, are you going to train your mind as much as you train your body? If this episode resonated with you, if it was helpful, please do me a favor. Like and comment. It's going to help more players find this. Share it with a teammate who you think might need to hear it. Leave a 5-star review on Apple. Follow me on Instagram for more daily tips and resources. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Head over to the website for free resources to stay in the loop, to learn about the coaching programs. And of course, I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me a message, share your takeaways, what you want me to cover next, guests you want me to talk to, whatever's on your mind. Appreciate you. We'll see you next time.